Morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are across the globe. Welcome to the Indegene Digital Summit and to this keynote session, which I promise you is going to be very interesting and thought-provoking. My name is Sanjay Parikh. I'm one of the founding members of Indegene, and today I have the unique pleasure and privilege to introduce Diana McKinsey. I've had the opportunity to interact with Diana over the last few months, and I cannot begin to say how truly impressed I am with the breadth of her knowledge, her experience, her insights, and most importantly, her ability to connect the dots from a very high strategic level to the details on the ground. Diana is a technology advisor, board member, and former CIO with over 30 years of leadership experience gained from growing, scaling, and transforming global businesses in the life sciences and software industry, in organizations with revenues ranging from 3 billion to 20 billion. She's the former CIO for Workday and Amgen, and today serves on the boards of several companies such as MetLife, Vertex Pharma, Change Healthcare, Genapsys, and Paradox. She's a special advisor to Brighton Park Capital and functions as a technology advisor and investor in a number of exciting healthcare technology and brain health focused startups. A thought leader and frequent speaker on digital transformation and diversity, Diana co-founded the Silicon Valley Women's CIO Network in 2017. She was recognized in 2015 as one of the nation's most powerful women in technology, and by the San Francisco Business Times on their 2018 Forever Influential Women's list. She remains active as an advisor to World 50's CIO community and volunteers philanthropically to grow memberships in the communities of One Mind at Work and the T200 CXO Women in Technology community. A mother of 2 adult sons, she enjoys competing in adventure races and teaching scuba with her husband. That sounds like her greatest achievement, I would say. I could go on and on with her several achievements, but that would take up the full hour. Instead, let me hand over to Diana and invite her to deliver her keynote address on a truly enticing topic. Let's get personal. Know me, heal me. Just one other quick point. Since we will have time for a few questions at the end of the talk, I would request you all to post your questions in the chat box, and I will then pose some of them to Diana after she's finished. Diana, welcome to the Indegene Digital Summit. The floor is all yours, and I am all ears.
Sanjay, thank you so much for that warm welcome, and I'm honored and indeed flattered to be here and have the privilege to address this audience of distinguished leaders in life sciences. I spent 30 years in this industry, and I love this industry. And what I hope to share on the coming slides is my lessons learned since taking a break from the industry to go work for a technology company, so that I can compare what it's like to work in 2 different companies, why I'm so excited about this particular time for this industry when it comes to digital transformation, and what we can learn from those companies, and quite frankly, some of my hard-earned lessons learned with digital transformation. So with that, let's take it to the slides. So when I was originally asked to give this keynote, I reflected on what really matters. We could talk about technology, we can talk about healthcare, but ultimately what really matters is what impact we can have on the patient. And I know that's something that we all agree with. At the time when I was giving thought to how to start the conversation, I just finished 4 months of working through a process with my 84-year-old mother who had fallen on ice, broken a bone, had surgery. Complications followed that surgery. We had to have her admitted to a short-term rehab unit. And then ultimately, her recovery was such that she ended up needing to sell her home, sell her car, and move to an assisted living facility. And for those of us at this stage of our lives who are working through these kinds of situations with our aging parents, I know you can relate to the challenges associated with being a child and wanting the best for your parent. But it occurred to me through that entire journey what we wanted for my mom, what I wanted for my mom, was for the physicians to know her. She's an ex-nurse. She knows a lot about healthcare. I wanted them to know what she knew, and I wanted to make sure that they weren't just treating her across all of those different facilities, but they were healing her. I think we're at this unique time in technology and in science where our two worlds are coming together and they're merging as one. And the promise of being able to help a patient know what it feels like to receive caring attention, to receive time, clarity of understanding, positive outcomes, the right diagnosis, the right therapy at the right time for that patient. This promise of personalized medicine has never been more possible than it is today when we look at all of the changes that are happening in the technology space, including the introduction of technology companies into healthcare. So what I'd like to do is to briefly touch on some of the digital natives that we all have come to know, respect, and in some cases love, and in some cases not love so much, and how they're reshaping the healthcare ecosystem. And then how those advancements are driving us towards an inflection point within life sciences proper. There are all kinds of lessons we can learn from these disruptors. We can partner with these disruptors. And then it's in that vein that I've selected 4 different case examples where technology companies are working with life sciences companies to help us achieve the promise of personalized medicine. Know me, heal me. And then lastly, I'll share some of the lessons learned that I've gained through my experiences leading a digital transformation at Amgen, working for a disruptive software company, and engaging now with a number of companies who are undergoing these types of transformations. So in the reshaping healthcare space, we all know and have seen over the course of the last several years, a number of these technology companies begin to engage in healthcare. We've seen Facebook last year release their Oculus product to medical teaching institutions to help physicians better train on how to interact with technologies in patients. Apple has improved the health metrics that you can capture through their Apple Watch and made it possible for individuals to share that content with their caregivers. Microsoft purchased Nuance, a conversational AI platform for healthcare for almost $20 billion, and then released the Microsoft Healthcare Cloud, which includes automation, artificial intelligence, and low-code environments for app development focused on the healthcare space. And lastly, Amazon's been in the news on and off for the past several years with respect to their foray into healthcare, notwithstanding the fact that many of us rely on them for our compute infrastructures. They also are building a business in this space. And earlier this year, they announced the launch of Amazon Care, which initially was released for just a few of the states where their employees operate, with the goal to release it to all 50 United States by the end of the year for all of their employees, and ultimately for employers to be able to bring this care in for their employees within their institutions. So here's a product video that some of you may have seen, some of you may not, but I think it's a great view into how Amazon is thinking about reshaping healthcare.
Hey. Is this for sure?
The best care is always by your side.
What's the matter?
There for you whenever you need it. Which is why we created Amazon Care. A healthcare experience built around you that cares for you and those you care for. Whether you need an answer to a question, someone to speak with face-to-face,
He's been complaining that his right ear has been hurting.
or visit you in person,
I'd like to send a mobile care nurse to take a look in that ear.
Amazon Care makes it easy for you to access the care you need.
Hi.
No appointments, no waiting rooms. Ready and available to provide in-person exams, testing, and treatments from your home or workplace.
That ear does look infected. Based on his symptoms, let's go ahead and get him started on antibiotics.
From delivering prescriptions to providing the follow-up information you need. With Amazon Care, care is always by your side, letting you focus on what matters most.
So as interesting as that is, I did leave one big company out. I'm sure you're all wondering when I'm going to speak about them. So just know that that they'll be included here shortly as I go through some of these use cases. But one of the other things I think we've all observed, and this is over the course of the last 10, 15 years, is that we've seen technology enter a number of industries and reshape those industries, disrupt those industries completely. And there always is this bias for focus on the consumer or focus on the individual, understanding what their needs and wants are, and then offering services that are tailored to that individual. And last year with the pandemic, what we saw is the exposed gaps, if you will, in the end-to-end ability for us to treat a patient from start to finish. And with that, the introduction of increasing numbers of emerging technology companies and the larger, more established technology companies into that space. So much so that in the second quarter of 2021, close to $32 billion alone was invested by VCs in this space. So we know that there's tremendous opportunity in this market space. Last year, one of the surveys conducted by CB Insights of the senior executives in large enterprise institutions noted that 87% of them believed that the cost of healthcare for their employees would become unsustainable within the next 5 to 10 years. So with that change, in comes the technology companies and the opportunity for us to do something with them and about that. And, I have been in the industry for a long time. And while I stepped away, as I come back to healthcare and technology, where I ideally want to spend the rest of my career, I have the opportunity to work with many startup biotech companies that are thinking about how they tackle the digital component from the very beginning, where so many life sciences companies had a large legacy that they were operating on and had to figure out how they were going to pivot while they also modernized their legacy. Companies are being successful in both spaces. Life sciences can be successful here. And in many cases, a number of you work for companies that are leaders when it comes to digital transformation. But it is no longer a question of if we're going to change within life sciences. It is a conversation about what needs to change, how we're going to do it, and how fast we can go. When I was at Amgen, we worked very closely with the leader of the Center for Digital Innovation at the University of California, Irvine, a gentleman named Vijay Gurbaxani. And in those days, that was 2010, 2012, he was writing about the fact that every company would become a software company. Well, we are indeed at that point today. And in order for us to compete in this industry with all the technology companies that are entering the space, we all have to be thinking like software companies. So what can we learn from these companies? Well, when I made the change from Amgen to Workday, one of the things I would say was most concerned about, and what I loved so much about working in life sciences, was that almost every day when I'd go into the office and interact with my colleagues in scientific research, discovery research, translational sciences, I always learned something. I learned something that I didn't know the day before. And the pace of learning, the pace of change in science and medicine was something that I had a huge appetite for. And on top of that, we had the double challenge in that we needed to keep up from a technology standpoint. So there was a need to learn about technology and stay on top of technology, but also stay on top of science. And I thought, well, when I go to work for a disruptive, albeit fast-growing software company that's operating right now to disrupt the the human capital management space, will I be as motivated? Will I find as much intellectual stimulation there as I did in the life sciences company? And I was surprised to learn that I indeed found that. Because for these companies that operate within software and tech, the barriers to entry are far lower, which means competitors are always around the corner. So they have to move far faster. They have to make innovation truly the core of their DNA. And because of that, they're continuously learning, continuously innovating, and continuously remodeling their products. And so it was the pace and it was the intellectual curiosity and innovation that I found filled the void that I thought might be created when I made that move from life sciences to the technology company. What I've done here is I've identified 4 different areas where I found surprising similarities and differences with respect to how technology companies operate and how life sciences operates. So I'm going to dive into those now. The first of those is the innovation culture. Within life sciences, everything is about innovation. Science and medicine, treating the patient, curing the patient, are all based on the use of the scientific method, hiring really smart people who've become experts in their domain to help us better understand how best to develop therapies that are going to treat or cure patients. What's interesting about the scientific method is it is all about experimentation. Within a technology company, the development of a minimally viable product, that very first instantiation of a product, in reality is nothing more than an experiment. They follow a very similar process, which is to develop a hypothesis or they have a question. They design an experiment, they execute the experiment, they evaluate the result, they learn, they incorporate that learning into the next iteration. Now, what's different between these two is the iterations in life sciences, in large part, are long duration because of the nature of the business we're in. The nature of the iterations within technology or software are much faster iterations. What's important to note here is 2 things. One, the culture of the company is everything. In this, every company is going to need to be a software company era that we live in. The demand for talent that can help us embrace the software mindset within our companies is off the charts. And there simply isn't enough talent out there to meet the needs across all of the companies in all of the industries that are trying to become software companies. So within your company proper, within technology company proper, so incredibly important to create a culture where learning is rewarded and incented, where innovation is rewarding and incented, and quite frankly, where failure that results in learning that makes the product better is rewarded and incented. And I think that's where these 2 industries share a similar culture. The pace is clearly an area where there's an opportunity for life sciences to catch up. But I know there are great examples already out there where life sciences is making a movement in this direction. The second area has to do with product development. Within life sciences companies, I would say in my own personal experience, where I found the most satisfaction as a leader in technology was when I got to participate as a member of the therapeutic team or the product strategy team, which often was as a guest, because there was a very specific number of people that were involved on the product strategy team to bring any therapy to market. And those people were picked specifically because of their expertise. And collectively, that cross-functional nature of the domains that they brought together is what made the product commercialization vision a reality, the targeted patient profile a reality. And so what these people did, as you well know, every day is they brought their functional expertise together. They worked together as a team. They challenged each other as a team. They disagreed. They figured out how to agree, and they figured out how to move forward. That in reality is no different than how product teams work within a software company. In a software company, the titles are different, but the individuals that come together on these 2 pizza teams, if you will, bring their different domains of expertise, and they hash through what the product needs to look like, what the features need to look like, what the sprint schedule will look like. So again, back to the point I made on the previous similarity and difference comparison, there's a pace question here where in the life sciences space, often we're working at a longer time duration. And one of the things I observed, which I think is changing in the industry, is that the product team members sometimes spent as much time back in their functions as they did on their product team together. In software, the product team is where you spend your time. It's 80% of where individuals spend their time. And so over time, as life sciences adopts more of a digital therapeutics companion app component, thinks a bit more about the digital element of how they reach patients, we'll start to see more of these software elements, these product development elements of the software company come into the life sciences products team. And there'll be an important element of stitching those 2 things together. And I have an example of that I'll share with you here in just a second. The third area, and I found this actually quite compelling, is I recognized that one of the challenges we had, and quite frankly, it was an area where we were focusing our time as digital, with our digital health program, was on the ability to help a patient understand the value they were receiving from taking our therapeutic. And in doing so, creating companion apps, digital apps that would help them better understand that value. Because we knew that convincing a physician to write the prescription was just the beginning. In reality, we needed the patient to fill the prescription. We needed to make sure they were reimbursed for that prescription, and there was a role for us to play there. And we also needed to ensure they took the therapy on the schedule that was set forth, and then they went back and refilled the prescription. So how do you know what's happening for that patient at every step of the way if you haven't instrumented your enterprise to gather those insights from patients, if you haven't thought carefully through the patient journey so that you can gather those insights? For software companies, that's job one. A subscription is great. When we sell a subscription, terrific. But now in this as a service time, it's easy enough for a company to say, well, it was easy enough for me to sign up for your subscription. It's easy enough for me to leave it or not to renew when the time comes back because I didn't gain value from it, or I didn't get the support I was supposed to get, or your sales team sold me something that your services team wasn't able to deliver, or your support wasn't able to make sure actually functioned for me in the way I wanted it to. So software companies have a very similar challenge, and that is understanding once the subscription has been sold, how do you keep the customer adopting and using the technology in a way that when it's time to renew, they're happy and willing to renew and possibly even expand the number of services that they've purchased from your as a service model. Common business challenge. What's different is in software and technology, there are a vast greater number of customer experience skilled individuals. And the notion of thinking through the customer journey is really it's almost foundational to these companies. And so as they grow, they're tempted, like any other company growing fast, to build information in their vertical silos within their functions and not share information across boundaries. But as soon as those silos start to grow, and the data starts to become self-contained within those silos and can't pass across the boundaries, so that you know the lead you generated, the sale you delivered, the services that you use to deploy, and the support that you're giving to the customer after the fact. If you can't tell the story for that customer, then you have a really hard time, assuring yourself that you're going to get the renewal or the expansion. So very similar challenge, different skill sets, and it's a skill set that we see the life sciences industry spending more time and energy developing in that patient journey, patient experience space. And the last is the one that I think you've all been waiting for. And that is this notion that, but wait a minute, our industry is so much more complex than a software industry. We have FDA regulation, we have CE marked products, we have privacy, we have security, we have. And you know what? That's true. Honestly, for me, I was amazed at how simple the business model within software was. You design, you develop, you test, deploy, move it to production. And once you push the veritable big button and it's in production, then it's up to your customers to uptake it, use it, and take advantage of all the new features you're rolling out, in some cases weekly, in some cases daily, some cases every 6 months. Not so easy in life sciences. We all know it's a much longer process. The chances of failure are much higher. With all of that being said, there are so many practices in software that can be brought to life sciences and are indeed now being brought to life sciences when we think about product development, lifecycle management, and we think about lean startup and agile methodologies. And I know for a fact that there are a variety of life sciences companies that are beginning to adopt agile methodologies. ideally not just within the technology function, but across the entire company in any space where there's the opportunity to speed the enrollment of clinical trials, to find ways to automate manufacturing, to find different channels for reaching your customers, for using artificial intelligence in the very early stages of discovery research to be more successful in finding that genetic target that you want to go after. So it's bringing these two models together, and this is where I'll share an example from my Amgen experience. We were developing an algorithm that we wanted to run in a large US oncology system as a proof of concept. And we were going to use that data to help us gain FDA approval for software as a medical device. And as we were piloting this software, one of the things that we learned, we learned quite a few things, but one of the things that we learned is that we had a compliance and legal function that could advise us on how to develop a drug, but they could not advise us on how to develop software as a medical device. And the challenges, as you all know, as I've spoken to here, is the pace of software development needs to move much more quickly than the pace we can move with the development of a therapy. So what we ended up doing is agreeing with the legal and compliance functions to bring in 2 headcount to be part of those functions, but those 2 headcount would be dedicated and experienced in software development, FDA approvals, and all that we needed to have from an advisory perspective on this team to build this algorithm so that we could move faster, but move with the confidence that we were going about it in a way that would allow us to be successful in ultimately making this product available to oncologists who were treating their patients. So I'm going to shift now with those 4 lessons learned to the technologies that I'm following and why I think they're important. What you'll see here on the left is just a laundry list of all of the technologies that you read about almost every day. And I think we all know that much of what we read can often be ascribed as hype and often is ascribed as hype. And I even thought about going through the experiment of taking each of these technologies and placing them on the hype cycle. But in reality, I'm not an expert at that. And it ultimately comes down to how the specific technology is being applied. And in this case, just to break down the techno speak, the AI and ML is artificial intelligence and machine learning. IoT, Internet of Things. So this is where we equip devices with sensors that send us feedback. 5G is the next wave of networking, which makes it possible for us to take all of the data from those little devices and move it much more quickly over the World Wide Web, get it where it needs to go. Edge computing actually allows us to do full-scale computing on a device at the edge so that you're not needing to move that data over the 5G network or all of that data over the 5G network. You can actually run your algorithms on the device itself. X as a service, infrastructure, platform, data, so many different services being offered generically, X as a service. Blockchain, ultimately that underlying ability I hope to see someday come alive within healthcare around identities and patient identities. Computer vision, augmented and virtual reality, and quantum computing, which is pretty far down the path. But when we think about what the advancements of being able to compute at that scale can bring to some of the models that we're trying to train right now, there's just a tremendous opportunity, but it's pretty far away. So it's really not any one of these technologies that excites me. It's the combination of these technologies that are being built into platforms that is exciting, because any one of these technologies can create a point solution. But when we take them and we embed them into platforms that are scalable and made available to us through some of these big technology players, we have the opportunity to leverage a multiple of these components in that platform to deliver an end-to-end, less fragmented solution for patients that starts to look more like what we all hope to see with the promise of personalized medicine. So what I've done is I've selected 4 different examples, and they're very different examples. And I've done this based on ideally identifying only one of them as a regulated device at this point, but ideally just to inspire to inspire you to think about how these technologies can come to play in different ways, both within the healthcare and the life sciences space. So I'll start first with that company I referenced earlier that I didn't talk about when I talked about the digital natives reshaping healthcare. What you'll see here is Google's AI-powered dermatology tool pilot. And what this device does is it allows an individual to take a picture of whatever it is that's happening on their skin. It takes that picture, it uses the models that it has, and it determines what that might be so that the individual can then decide how to go see their physician with this. The reason this is so important for Google is that there are close to 1.9 billion people in the world that are suffering from some sort of skin condition. And many of them see a GP. They don't see a dermatologist because the dermatologists aren't available or they can't afford it. GPs often get it right maybe 24 to 70% of the time. What Google hopes to do is to take this pilot, learn from it, apply it, and make it a companion for a general practitioner so that when a patient comes to them with a skin condition, it doesn't replace the GP's experience, but it augments it and makes it easier, especially if it turns out that the individual has some sort of skin cancer, to get on top of it and help that patient heal faster. So that's Google. I'm going to talk about BioVitals for heart failure. And this is a product that was recently approved by the FDA for a company named Bioformus, which is developing a predictive personalized medicine platform, leveraging artificial intelligence, deep learning, sensors, all of the technologies I referred to earlier, but in a platform. And this particular product allows patients who have left the emergency room to go home with a prescribed device, the Averian device. And what it does is it monitors about 20 different signals on the patient, leverages the deep learning models they've developed, and identifies if that patient's unique fingerprint, if you will, starts to change. And if it does, it can alert their physician and it can alert the patient that something isn't going right based on the patient's personalized specific profile. And if that's the case, then the physician is able to intervene and adjust the patient's therapy, adjust the patient's routine. And this can typically happen 14 days before leading to a serious event. And they've demonstrated that this is the case, and it gets it right about 99% of the time. So it's a very exciting development, if you will, in this digital therapeutic space, where we have the opportunity to meet a large need surrounding readmissions in the emergency department for heart failure patients, keep them healthy, keep them home, and maintain their quality of life. Another example is a company that I've personally got to know last year. They're a seed stage company. But what I think is exciting about this, and you heard Sanjay talk about the fact that I'm very involved and interested in brain and mental health. It's an area that I'm deeply passionate about. As we all know, behavioral health and mental health issues are often underlying comorbidities for chronic care issues. And in the case where this happens, there are today 40% of adults are suffering from some sort of depression or anxiety. 80% of that population goes undiagnosed because they're being treated for some other chronic illness. So what if you could have a device, and this device is developed in this way, that can gather 35 different signals just from a smart device? It can be any smart device, based on 40 years of research that has been done in circadian rhythms. There's actually 4 different categories of data that this device captures passively from the patient. And it does not read texts, it does not read their emails and probe into their Facebook accounts. All of this is passive. And what it can do is it starts to identify, based on that patient and that patient's activities, when the patient's beginning to decline. Because 6% of the patients who suffer from chronic conditions have these underlying behavioral and mental health issues, they drive close to 44% of healthcare costs. So if there's an opportunity to take, for instance, what we talked about with the Bioformis solution, we think about heart failure as a chronic condition, and we think about treating the underlying comorbidity of behavioral and mental health, what you end up with is just another case where for this particular patient, they were self-reporting in a clinical trial against their PHQ survey, how they were feeling. The passive application or algorithm that was running on their device was also capturing a number of these signals. And what you'll see is a pretty tight correlation between the signals the device picked up and what the patient self-reported. And what you'll see in the April 7th to April 21st case is where the device picked up some disruption that the patient didn't report. And what this allows is for a care manager to intervene and for the device itself to send messages to the patient, little micro reminders, if you will, about their daily schedule, about their sleep, about their activity, whatever the case may be that's right for them. Again, another personalized way and predictive way to keep patients well. This next one I found truly exciting. and the background here is I was listening to something called a CXO talk a couple of weeks ago, hosted by Michael Krigsman. He has quite a few really great speakers on his program. And this particular program included the person who leads the AI healthcare organization at NVIDIA. And I thought, wow, I only know NVIDIA as the microprocessor that's used in all of the gaming applications and has made, gaming something really, really tremendous. And quite frankly, a component of what a lot of companies are trying to bring into the software that they're developing right now. But what I learned is NVIDIA develops these global processing units and these systems on a chip, if you will, for professional applications as well. And they're very committed to healthcare. So in India, 25% of the 10 million people in the world who suffer from tuberculosis are in India. And India has a desire to eradicate tuberculosis within the country by 2025. The UN has set the goal for 2030. So this startup organization, Deep Tech, has partnered with NVIDIA's accelerator program to create a way to capture samples from patients who've been diagnosed with tuberculosis. And the challenging part of this is the follow-up, is once they've been diagnosed and treated, how do you ensure that these patients are continuing to improve? And it's a very manual, labor-intensive process to gather their samples. There are actually vans that are sent out in this particular space where they're running the pilot to capture those samples from the individuals who've been diagnosed. But the process of reading the samples can take up to 40 minutes for one slide. So I'm going to show you a video of how this company is partnering with a variety of other players to change this for those patients. So what they showed you was one of these slides with the patient sample on it under the microscope. On the left-hand side was the result of the manual observation. On the right-hand side was the AI model replicating for them that it found exactly the same results from that sample. So ultimately, what is happening here is the amount of time that it takes to read each slide is being reduced from 40 minutes to 7 minutes, which means that the scale of samples that can be reviewed and assessed and patients that can be treated is obviously greatly increased. And NVIDIA is quite delighted about the fact that they're able to take part in this particular program. And again, I wanted to call your attention to one of these large digital technology companies that's playing in our space that some of you may not have even known. We're developing AI applications for healthcare. I thought that was actually quite exciting. Okay, for the next one, I'm actually not going to I will roll the video for you, but I will speak to the video as it goes. So let's do this. Let's see if I can pull this off. So we are familiar with what's happening in the manufacturing space within life sciences, where we're actually seeing many life sciences companies fully embrace automation, fully embrace robotics, and finding ways to streamline, reduce the cost of manufacturing, and quite frankly, create smaller batches, more personalized batches of medicine, if you will, for the patient populations that are out there. Specifically with CRISPR and Cas9 technologies, as we start to edit genetics, we get into cell and gene technologies and manufacturing more personalized medicines that give us the ability to cure patients, not just treat patients. And that's incredibly exciting. And we have manufacturing capabilities developed all over the world in order to make that a reality, as we work to make that a reality through clinical trials and regulatory processes. But what we haven't done yet is we haven't seen anyone attack the problem of developing living tissue through manufacturing. And that's exactly what ARMY is about. ARMY was launched in 2017 by the Department of Defense with an $80 million investment that's subsequently been matched with $245 million of investment by public and private partnerships. And in that, this group of very smart people have developed and are developing a manufacturing line that can start with a basic cell and over time develop living tissue. Now, this is something that isn't yet a reality, but it is the promise of what can happen when you bring a platform together. And in this case, it's Rockwell Automation boxes in this room that make it possible for scientists to interact with the manufacturing process through technology. And ultimately, you develop an organ for an organ transplant, or potentially even down the road, a limb for a patient that's lost a limb. So it's a very inspiring, very compelling vision. And while it's not reality today, I do think it shows the promise of just another way of thinking about personalized medicine and doing that with a lens to our colleagues who operate in the manufacturing sciences space. So with that, I hope these 4 examples have inspired you. I know they inspire me, and there are so many, many more. I mean, when it came time for me to select what I would highlight in this particular part of the keynote, was really hard for me to narrow it down. So I went with examples that I hoped would cover the gamut of what's possible with these platforms. But in reality, it is about technology. It's about show me, don't tell me. Actually, show me what people are doing. But when it all comes down to it, it really making it happen is not about technology at all. I mean, technology is clearly an important element of it. But for me, in my own personal journey and in my own lessons learned, it really comes down to leadership and culture. If the change doesn't start from the top, and I've been in and or observed environments where it doesn't start from the top, it's not that it can't happen. It's just harder, and it takes longer, and it costs more. And the ability to deliver truly game-changing outcomes that are going to help the company be more competitive is reduced. If it starts at the top, that's lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is there's no such thing as a digital strategy that stands on its own. Digital strategy has to be encompassed in the company strategy. The company strategy has to be shaped by their digital strategy. If it's a separate strategy that's operating off to the side, separate and apart from the company strategy, it will take longer, it will be harder, and it will deliver fewer results. So there are 2 key lessons that I've learned, that I know many of you have learned. But if there are any of you out there that are just starting on this journey, I would encourage you to start with those 2. There are also additional areas where I think focus and attention, if they're paid upfront, can make a terrific difference. And I'll start with leadership and incentives. Leadership, I spoke earlier about starting from the top, but I'll give you an example of what this looks like. When we were developing the algorithm in the past, when I was at Amgen, this algorithm, if it worked, could have resulted in an oncologist choosing not to prescribe our product or choosing to prescribe our product at a lower dose. So imagine if you're the person responsible for generating the revenue in that sales division, and you have a technology team that's developing a solution that will build trust and respect with the patient and oncology community, but at the same time may reduce your revenues for that particular product. How do you work through that? Who makes the decision about how sales quotas are affected? Who makes the decision about how you measure the impact this product might have? It might actually increase the number of prescriptions that are written because it gives physicians confidence that this product is actually going to work in the patients for whom it's prescribed. So thinking about decision rights, thinking about governance and incentive systems, a very, very important part of the leadership aspect of this. In addition to that, operating models have to change when we think digitally. The way companies were built traditionally was function by function or business unit by business unit. And within each of those, they optimized for the performance of that unit. Today, when we think about that customer journey and we think about the way in which data needs to flow in order to map the journey from start to finish, it means the company has to be incented to think differently about how you work horizontally versus working vertically. The only person who can drive that change, drive that organizational change, is the CEO of the company and an executive leadership team. When we move to talent and partnerships, I referenced this earlier, so incredibly important to have the right talent, to seed the talent with some of these sprinters who have the fast twitch muscles, who've worked in an industry that's operating at the pace of tech. But there simply aren't enough of those out there. So how do you seed your environment with those sprinters and help take the people that you have in your environment and teach them how to operate in a new way? And that is a key element of talent and partnerships. Another element is diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's a conversation that we're all having in every company right now. Our patients represent us. They represent every shape and size of person on the planet. And if all of us aren't included in developing the therapeutics and the products, keeping that patient at the center in mind, we're going to miss an opportunity to meet the needs of any specific patient population, which overall is going to help our company grow. And the last piece of this is thinking about what you buy and what you build, thinking about who you partner with and in technology. And I'll give you an example here. When we were at Amgen and we were building this algorithm and wanting to run it in the electronic health record of this oncology organization, there was no GXP infrastructure. Amazon Web Services was just getting started. They were looking at GXP, but they saw that it was a mammoth hill to climb in order to create a GXP infrastructure. Google was really just getting started, as was Microsoft in this space. So we couldn't rely on anybody to build, to use their infrastructure to create the compute for us. In addition, electronic health records were just being rolled out. And so there were no APIs. There was no way to easily connect and move data between them. That has all changed today. My fellow digital health leader at Amgen left Amgen and went to form a company called Bright Insight. And what Bright Insight does is they've developed that GXP platform in partnership with these big digital natives. And it makes it possible for you to move CE marked and FDA data safely, securely, compliantly over their platform. Didn't exist at the time. I would never build it today, but we had to build it then. So thinking about it from that perspective, super important. On the focus and methods, product development lifecycle, agile methodology. If this change is driven from the top down, embracing agile methodologies across the company is something that's possible. And again, while I recognize in a highly regulated environment, you can't put agile methodologies in at every juncture, at every decision point as you're interacting with regulatory authorities for drug approvals. But there are so many places that it can come in, and it can speed processes in between those that are fairly static and help you go faster and help you get smarter and be more patient and customer focused. And lastly, on the performance measures and fundings, ideally, if the outcomes of whatever proof of concept you're building, whatever product you're building, if the outcomes are how you determine how successful that product has been in terms of the value that it's delivering to the patient or the value that it's delivering someplace in your company because you have a set of insights you didn't have before, that's a great way to gauge, as opposed to how much progress have we made on this project? How far into the project development are we? In addition to that, so many companies in tech leverage this concept of objectives and key results. The John Doerr Measure What Matters book, if you've heard about it. They do that because it takes the bias away from actions and moves it towards outcomes. And while achieving an outcome could take years, there are outcomes that we can measure along the way that are very different than measuring and rewarding actions. And so thinking about taking an OKR approach to how you measure and reward performance within your company can also be a huge enabler. And then lastly, this is a process we know very well within life sciences. A therapy only advances through clinical trials when it meets a successful set of endpoints. With respect to your digital initiatives, clearly identify what those endpoints look like. And when the value's been delivered, then and only then does that initiative gain more funding to expand and move on to additional iterations. So with that, I want to give you an example of a company that I think has done this well. And while this company is not a life sciences company, they are a healthcare company. They process over 14 billion transactions a year, equal to close to, well, over $1 trillion in healthcare claims. They have a service, a set of technology services where they're trying to transform, this is within the US proper, the US healthcare system, and streamline that healthcare system and take hundreds of billions of dollars out of the healthcare system through the application of technology. This company, though, has been around for a while, and they are the product of multiple M&A transactions. And as we all know, especially for those of us that have grown up in large life science companies that have had quite a bit of M&A, you bring in the platforms from those other companies, and often those platforms are considered legacy. They require modernization and they slow us down. And they constitute a portion of the whole of our legacy application and technical debt. And they make it appear as if it's going to be really hard to get this digital thing moving. But in this case, change has quite a bit of technology capability, quite a bit of investment going into their technology platform. And they're doing really great things with that right now. They're moving at a pace that's quite fast and looks a lot like a technology company. They still have the legacy that they're dealing with. And so Neil, who is the CEO of this company, embraced, along with his executive team, this notion of the innovation framework, which is not how does just the technology function embrace product development, lifecycle management, and agile methodologies, but how do we as an entire company embrace those methods and those approaches? And so they created this framework that actually takes them through, every person in the company will go through this training where they'll have the opportunity to understand how do you identify the outcomes you're going after? How do you solve for that and validate that you've achieved it? Once you've created your minimally viable product, how do you optimize and tune it? Make sure you're developing it and doing everything you can to automate those practices so that you're going faster and getting better. And in all of those cases, you'll see down below, there's these elements of these advanced technologies that I was sharing with you before that are components of the platform that they're developing. They've identified levels of certification, and employees gain badges from being certified in these different ways of thinking. So it's a classic example of where leadership at the top has engaged the executive leadership team. They've identified what it is they want to see in their culture around innovation, frameworks, adoption of agile methodologies, product development life cycle. So this notion of moving from project to product. And then they're training their people. They've hired people from the outside. They had some people who were already sprinters, if you will, and they're using this as a way to bring everybody to the same level playing field when it comes to how they execute against their goal. And they're doing a great job with this. And I thought this was just a role model approach to doing this kind of work. And I've seen it actually MetLife is doing something very similar to this as well. But I wanted to bring you a healthcare example because I thought it was just a great example. So with that, I'm going to wrap. I hope that as we've gone through some of the examples here, notwithstanding the fact that you couldn't hear two of the videos that I played, so I'm sorry about that. I hope you're still inspired. I hope you see how I see how right the time is, how much of an imperative it is for the life sciences industry to embrace this digital change, make it part of your company, make it part of your strategy, and putting the patient first, putting the customer first, and everything else sort of takes care of itself. I think we all believe that to be the case. And there's never been a better time for us to put the patient first, leveraging the technology and the science capabilities that you all have to deliver on this promise of personalized medicine. So I'm inspired. I hope you're inspired. And with that, I think we're ready to stop the show and take some questions.
Thank you so much, Diana. This was a wonderful presentation, really inspiring. In fact, I think we could have just gone on and on. So I would have loved to see several of the other examples that you chose to leave out. There have been several questions. Of course, several of them are about, how does one kind of scale this kind of innovation within a large pharmaceutical company? Unfortunately, we are absolutely out of time. And So I've been wrapped on the knuckles and told that I'm going to have to wind this up. But clearly, there's a lot to unpack from what you presented to us, and I deeply appreciate the time that you've taken. And I'm hoping, and I'm pretty confident that the audience has found this presentation to be as interesting, innovative, as well as inspiring as I have. And I think what you've shown us really is that the practice of healthcare, the delivery of healthcare is just going to change completely. Not even within a generation, within a matter of months, if not years, or years, if not months, I would say. But again, thank you so much for your presentation. Really fantastic.
Thank you. It truly was a pleasure to be here.
And thank you to the audience. We hope that you enjoyed this presentation and continue to enjoy the rest of the summit. Have a super day and stay safe. Thank you.